today is a really, really pivotal moment. And I appreciate that sometimes you get bogged down in details, but come 10 o'clock today, I think the government is either going to be jubilant or going to be back to infighting.
Should we start with what the government are hoping with, which is that the Supreme Court gives the green light? How much of a win is that for Rishi Sunak and for the Home Office?
It'll be an enormous win for Rishi Sunak if the court lets this go ahead, because he is underpinning all of his migration problems upon the courts agreeing that we can send people over to Rwanda and they can start their lives there. So this has been one of the major pledges. Everything has been pinned around this. And it originally started, if you remember, back with Priti Patel in 2022. So this has been a long time in the making and has been caught up in the courts now for such a long time that I think he's probably hoping that this brings an end to the merry-go-round of court action.
Can you remind us why it is that there were problems, legal problems with the policy in the first place?
I think the main issue with the courts is that they don't dispute that sending migrants to a third country is unlawful. They've said that is fine. What they are concerned about is the safety of individuals, especially within Rwanda. They are concerned that the Rwandans will not take the safety of an individual claimant correctly, and they could end up being sent back to the country of origin where they could be treated inhumanely and perhaps even death, torture, you name it, a whole host of really unpleasant options. So they aren't convinced that the Rwandans have safeguards in place for those individuals. And that is why we haven't seen any flights go. And this is why it's now at the Supreme Court to have a look at that one part of the ruling.
So if the government don't get the go-ahead, they've said, look, we've got these contingency plans, these workarounds. What might they be looking at to action this, irrespective of what the Supreme Court say?
I think there's a couple of things that they're looking at, and one of them is the big question about should the UK remain within the ECHR, the European Court of Human Rights, and looking to make amendments to the Human Rights Act. Now, both of those have real severe complications. They aren't ideal in any way, shape or form, and especially when you look at the case of Northern Ireland, all of the protections for trade and human rights under the Brexit laws need us to remain within the ECHR. So you have an issue with Northern Ireland. The other issues that I believe the government are looking at are other third countries, to draw up a list of different countries that perhaps don't have the same kind of concerns as Rwanda regarding safety of individuals. So today is a really, really pivotal moment. And I appreciate that sometimes you get bogged down in details, but come 10 o'clock today, I think the government is either going to be jubilant or going to be back to infighting.
And if it is the latter option, how do you think the new Home Secretary will handle this? Because presumably it might be a less hard line than that of Suella Braverman.
James Cleverly is certainly a more conciliatory individual. I think that he is less hardline. He is less invested perhaps within the Rwanda scheme. So he will look at perhaps other countries, look at what Europe is doing, because there are now talks about other countries sending migrants for processing elsewhere. So I think he perhaps will bring that foreign secretary hat with him and look to a more global solution, which I think is a really good way forward. And I kind of hope that that's what happens, because we need to think more globally rather than just be wedded to one particular option, which is not ideal.
One of the biggest problems for the Conservatives right now, there's a polling that was done by the group More in Common. They found that it was the government's failure to tackle illegal immigration and channel crossings that was the main reason why Conservative voters said they wouldn't vote Conservative again. You know, there's not much time, Claire, potentially a year, sort of maybe a little bit more. Can you see the Conservatives putting in policies in place that would actually stop the boats and be able to shift public opinion?
You know, I've always said that this pledge to stop the boats was quite plainly ridiculous. It was always doomed to fail. You aren't ever going to stop 100% of the crossings. People are going to be desperate. People are going to make money out of a situation like this. So it's nigh on impossible to do. However, I think if they're is some kind of mechanism that the government can use to process people quicker, to make those decisions faster, and actually remove people who don't have the right to be here. People will see some kind of material difference. The problem with migration at the moment is it's very, very visible. Years ago, we had people in lorries. The public wasn't quite so aware. They're coming over on boats. There is endless footage, and people are led to believe that this is an invasion, as per Suella Braverman's own words. So if you can stop some of that, if you can look to have something in place that makes a visible difference, I think the public will be slightly happier. But at the moment, there is nothing in place. There are no plans, and the public are really unhappy.